Tonight, obviously we're going to talk about some safety stuff and some auto accident physics relating to our cars, the DeLoreans. I think the easiest way for me to do that is kind of go through a little history, just a little history with me, and then my first car, some physics and stuff before we get into the crash of the first car, and then we'll kind of go from the tail end. How do we apply those physics? How do we apply the mechanical stuff with our cars to make our cars safer in this modern day? Because technology is always getting better, right? And if I remember right, last time I was down here, I believe you gave me a nice tidbit saying that it was the second safest car on the planet in 1981. We're 43 years later. So I started out, I used to fix up 65 Mustangs in high school, and then I got into these after graduating school, the first gen 4Runners. And then I was watching the show with the kids, and I'm like, oh my gosh, these look like Marty's truck. So I thought, hey kids, what do you think about us fixing up a DeLorean? And of course they all got went crazy, and my wife rolled her eyes at me. And so then I started doing the research into, well, can you get parts for a DeLorean? How does this all work? You know, all of us DeLorean owners know now, but at that time I knew nothing about it. And I stumbled across a guy in Indiana, Jason Sharkey, who I guess has bought over 100 of these and changed a few parts and then sold them to suckers like me that makes it a little bit safer, and then goes, here, Jake, come on and get your car. So he told me to get that book, the DeLorean Shopper's Guide or Buyer's Guide, so you learn to look underneath and things to look for. So I got that and started shopping around for months, and ended up buying one from him where I flew out and drove it home. So that was the first car that I got. And before we circle back to that car and around that time, we're going to go over some physics and then go to the story of the DeLorean. I jokingly call myself the DeLorean company's living crash test dummy. I did YouTube some other guy from Canada that has crashed both a stock one and a time machine, so I guess he's got me beat. I don't know if that's a title anybody should strive for, but there you go. So I just want to talk about a couple of statistics and go into some of the physics first before we get too far into this. 1.5 million crashes a year happen in the US alone, averaging about 3 million injuries, because a lot of times there's more than one occupant in a vehicle. And out of all of the personal injury cases that are tracked, half of these people end up with lifelong problems. Maybe not right away, and that's the tough part. Sometimes in a car crash, with all the adrenaline, think, oh, we're okay, and then things creep up on us later. So that's my area of expertise, is I'm a certified auto accident injury, occupant injury specialist physician. So I train doctors and attorneys, medical doctors, chiropractors, physical therapists, and attorneys in how to properly work up, diagnose, treat to full, what we call maximum medical improvement, so we can try to get that person back to as good as they were before the crash, or avoid many of the symptoms or problems that can creep up later. And then of course, if we document it properly, the attorneys actually have the right means to help leverage with insurance companies to make sure that insurance companies properly financial restitution to the people that were injured, especially if the crash wasn't their fault. So 10% end up with disabilities for the rest of their life, and that's just a horrible, horrible statistic. To me, it's even horrible that half the people end up with problems that creep up on them later. Here's a freaky thing: people that think they're okay, usually it's the 2-year mark that the scar tissue's formed up to the point and tightened up and solidified to the point that now they have lifelong problems. So you always want to get checked right after one, whether you think you're hurt or not. So I'm going to give you a little bit of research. The most widely accepted research in the personal injury world for neck injuries, because your neck is the most susceptible to injury in a car crash, because you got a 10-pound bowling ball on top of these tiny muscles and ligaments that's suddenly moving in the opposite direction of your torso or your body in a shear force, which we're not designed. We're designed for walking and running. We're not designed for a shear force to suddenly shove us, like we call it a bullet vehicle or a target vehicle. For a bullet vehicle to suddenly shove us in a different direction with several thousands of pounds of mass, we just aren't designed to handle it. The human body is so fascinating how strong and tough, and yet how fragile it can be at the same time. So the CROP guidelines are the most widely accepted guidelines in 37 states and 9 countries on what kind of physical medicines, chiropractic physical therapies should be done, and how often and for how long. And Utah was actually the first state in the nation to accept them, so it's kind of a fun little thing for us. So some of the CROP studies and the San Diego Spinal Research studies I'm going to show you are, I'm going to show you 2 videos of live occupants in car crashes from the early 90s, where we measured the physics applied to the human body, the occupants. Because when we go to court, the crash test experts, and I've had some of them speak in my seminars, and they're really cool. The highway patrol expert in crash physics, and these other people that are crash reconstructionists. All the physics they're applying apply to the vehicle. But the occupants actually experience a different set of physics than the vehicle itself. So here you see in a low-speed collision, which is 8 miles an hour, 4.9, the car experienced about 2 Gs, which is a measure of force, almost like gravitational force, but in a different direction, different thing. The torso experiences more than that, because this is a rear impact, by the way. So in a rear impact, you can't brace for that. But all of our car crash tests are front or just front offset crashes, right? And so we're developing all these crumple zones in the front of the cars for those kind of crashes. But as an occupant, you've got the crumple zone, hopefully a seatbelt, an airbag, and then you've got space that your muscles can actually help decelerate you over time and space to reduce some of those physical forces. In a rear impact or side impact, you're kind of at the mercy of physics as the occupant. In this one, the rear impact loads the seat, then the torso launches forward faster than the car, and the head even faster than the torso. Then a seatbelt engages and whips the head, and that's why there's so much injury even in low-speed collisions. Is that fairly logical stuff?
Yeah. Yep.
So in this video, this is at 9.9 miles an hour of the closing velocity of what we call the bullet vehicle. So again, this is a rear impact. So we have the target vehicle and the bullet vehicle that's in motion doing the striking. So the target vehicle is stopped, as if it were stopped at a stop sign or a stoplight, and it's being struck by the bullet vehicle. And upon impact, the occupant in the target vehicle, his head is going to experience 13 Gs. So let's put this into, let's just play with this. So Hill Air Force Base up in Utah, you've got these fighter jets that are banking a hard corner or going straight up. And I used to use this example all the time about Maverick, if he's banking a corner on his Navy jet, he might go straight up or bank a corner. If he hits 4 or 5 Gs, what happens to the typical human being? They pass out. The heart can't pump blood to the brain with more than 4 or 5 Gs. Now, of course, they came out with a sequel. Granted, it is the coolest sequel ever made, I think. But they're pushing them. Yeah, we can do 9, 10 Gs. I don't think so. But thank you all. Anyway, this guy's going to experience 13 Gs. Now, get this. You'll see that he's in a sedan. He's in a large sedan being struck by a small Honda. So he has mass in his favor. But he's being rear-ended by a vehicle, so he has no way to brace for that. So they're measuring his head acceleration. So the head's about 10 pounds, 13 Gs, so 10 times 13, roughly 130 pounds on top of these tiny muscles and ligaments. Again, moving the opposite direction of our torso 3 times in a split second. So is there a little room for injury in a crash, even a low-speed collision? Yeah, for sure. So that's a lot. So he had mass in his favor, and he still got injured and actually taken out of the study. There's a couple things that I would point out with this study. One, you'll notice there's very little visible damage to his car. Notice where his head restraint is, though.
Yeah.
Is that helping or hurting him? Hurting. It becomes a fulcrum, actually hyperextending his head and neck, tearing his anterior longitudinal ligament in front of his neck there in the spine, front of the spine.
He volunteered for this?
Yeah, $180 a day. Anybody actually be in one of these studies? Just say no. But we got some great nerd data from these things, so it's so helpful for us doctors to understand better the physics applied to the human body. So yeah, if we were to rewind that, there's very little damage to his vehicle. This is actually the second impact. They did it at 9.3 miles an hour, and then again at 9.9, and we had a $50 bumper clip break on the bullet vehicle. You noticed when it hit, the bumpers dropped down. This one his bumper popped in and popped out, what we call a 5 mile an hour bumper, where they're designed to hide damage so that there's less expense to fix the car. But again, if we had a Newton's cradle here, usually I bring one, if we had a Newton's cradle and there's no visible damage to the car, we got all this mass in motion from the bullet vehicle, strikes the target vehicle, all that energy is transferred from frame to frame to us, the occupants. And so we end up getting injured more in low-speed collisions. So then the next big question is, well, what's considered a low-speed collision? What do you think the cutoff is from a low-speed to a high-speed collision?
20?
Great guess. 20, great guess. That is a high-speed collision. Guess what the cutoff is, though?
15?
10.
Oh.
And the reason it's a 10 is not for anything magical other than the cars are designed to do different things at 10. At 10 mile an hour change of velocity, crumple zones should engage to help absorb some of the forces. They won't get rid of all the forces. Airbags are triggered to deploy with the inertia switch. So those things should happen to help us occupants absorb less physical forces, hopefully. Less change of velocity, less delta V, less what they call impulse. If I had a little bit of, silly putty, If I were to stretch silly putty slow, it stretches, but if we stretch it fast, what does it do?
Break.
Breaks.
It breaks. And so does our ligaments and our soft tissues. If we stretch them too fast, they just can't handle that. And that's why the research shows that 5 miles an hour or 8 Gs in the neck, we're guaranteed to have some sort of soft tissue injury. Now, I want to point that out. Maybe, I don't know if you ever see this at the hospitals or anything, but I always get reports from the hospitals and the ERs like, oh, it's just a soft tissue injury. Well, everything but my bones are soft tissue. It means my brain, my organs, my ligaments, my blood vessels. So soft tissue injuries are serious, especially ligamentous injuries because they don't have good blood supply to heal properly later. So we want to make sure of those. Now I'm going to show you a high-speed collision, but most of these tests are for frontal stuff. So this one's a frontal high-speed collision. So let's look at a couple of these numbers. 37 miles an hour, 17 delta V, 70 miles an hour, but he only experienced 10 G-forces. So he had experienced less G-forces as an occupant in the bullet vehicle than the guy did in a lower speed collision as in the target vehicle. Now this guy, he's got gloves on, he's got a seatbelt on. Look at this crumple zone engagement. Wow.
Whoa.
And he braced for impact because he could see it.
Yeah, he knew it was coming. He's like, I'm not going to break my wrists because those old airbags, sometimes they'll explode and break wrists or forearms. So we were talking last night about some cool airbag stuff, how they have the double airbag system. I want to look on the research on that because everything I'm looking at is that airbags are great, but like when we first started using them, it's the little 3 letters on the dash or on your steering wheel. You guys remember what that was? SRS, secondary restraint system. So if you're not wearing your seatbelt, under the quick change, you're going to end up in the explosion zone.
Yeah.
Boom, then it engages, and then you've got 3,000 pounds, 295 miles an hour straight towards your face, neck. And that's why the kids were talking about, when the kids, if they don't have those cool ones you guys are talking about, it's these kind, when they would explode and the kids are in the front seat and the seatbelt doesn't fit right, or they're not wearing a seatbelt, a lot of them would get neurologically decapitated.
Yep.
The car, they would move so quickly into the explosion zone, then it explodes, and they would take their head and, like that silly putty, but to their spinal cord, done. And so that's why they're very dangerous in our cars as a primary restraint, the way they're designed. The way we were talking about last night sounds really cool, very Jetsons-ish, which I thought was amazing, but unfortunately the way they are right now, you gotta have your seatbelt on in order for them to work properly to keep you out of the explosion zone. Other key, this is an interesting thing in production, since we're looking at production videos, it's $1 cheaper to put it in the steering wheel or the dash exploding towards you per vehicle than having it on the seatbelt how they originally planned, so it would explode away from you and then decelerate you over space and time. So, I don't know, I kind of wish we'd gone that route, but
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Put it in
Yeah,
the
why didn't we get
seatbelt.
the choice?
Yeah, give us the choice. Yeah, crazy. So let's talk about how that works with our cars and the DeLoreans. So let me give you my little story about my crash, and then we'll circle back and apply some of these physics, and hopefully we've all had a fun time learning some physics today. So history of ours, I took my kids to a car show in Utah shortly after we moved back from Portugal. I guess it was about 2009. So this car, got a picture, but it planted the seed, but didn't tip the scales yet. Small lake city, the weirdest thing, just a couple of years later, I'm having somebody come over to work on our heating and air conditioning, and the lady is the owner of this car. And we start talking about DeLoreans, and she's like, oh yeah, you can get parts for them and this and that. I'm like, what, really? Okay. And then these things all meshed with when I was watching them with the kids. I'm like, well, maybe we'll look into this. So she helped get us started on that way. I bought the one from Jason Sharkey, drove it home. Did I already say this? I got 2,700 alleged original miles. I put 1,500 miles on it within 24 hours of owning it, driving it across the country, getting it back to Utah, started fixing it up, and then that was in 2013. 2015, of course, it was the 30-year anniversary of the movie. We were starting to get a club going in Utah. We said, well, why don't we rent the theater and try to put together some big thing? So we started promoting that we were going to have this Back to the Future party for the 30-year anniversary. So we did a photo shoot over at the theater, and even took this one right here. And so we're just plugging this thing along, and I get this random phone call. This guy says, hey, you don't know me, but I'd like to use your car on the cover of my book. My name's Stephen Harlington. I'm the last living guy from the DeLorean trials.
Steve Arrington.
Steve Arrington, excuse me.
Yeah.
And so he told me his whole story. What a fascinating guy. What a really interesting story he's got. And of course I put it on the cover of my book. And when I bought it, I have to admit, I total transparency here. I'm kind of a nerd with, I don't want to pay taxes, but I want to save on taxes as much as I can. So I talked to my accountant, I said, hey, look, I'm thinking of buying a DeLorean. I want to make sure I can write this thing off 100%. And he's like, there's no way you're going to write that off 100%. So I put on the cover of the book. I made a TV commercial with some patients and with the car in it. And we've just done a lot of crossover marketing things. He's like, I think I can write your car off. So, just throwing small ideas out there. You know, side business, side gig, you can use your cars. So then what happened is we were, in 2017, and I'll skip this into the whole thing, but I spoke at Harvard on auto accident physics. Doing stuff
Our featured speaker is the author of The Physician's Guide to Whiplash and Other Hidden Soft Tissue Injuries, and regularly teaches seminars to train healthcare providers in personal injury, how to better rehab patients, and document and communicate in cases involving motor vehicle collisions. He has shared the stage with Mark Victor Hansen, Dr. Fab Mancini, Dr. Patrick Gentempo, Dr. Wayne Dyer, etc., etc. Please welcome Dr. Jay Shetlin.
Hi there. Thank you, Harvard. It is great to be with all you wonderful entrepreneurs and business leaders. I'd like to talk about the topic of personal injury for just a moment today. And before you think, does this really apply to me? Each of us in this room and those watching this video will either be in or know somebody who is in a motor vehicle collision in the next 90 days. So I said that, I taught that, and I jinxed myself because 1 week to the day later, we're coming back from Park City. We're planning our little club meeting where we're going to go to Southern Utah the next year. We're going to tour around. We were setting up a support vehicle, so we had tools and everything in case one of us had any trouble, and we were just planning this whole thing out. But when Park City planned it out, which Park City is just west of Salt Lake City. How many miles away?
East.
How many miles? You guys drive
East.
Oh, I'm sorry, east of Salt Lake City. How many miles?
50, maybe.
Okay,
Well,
15 miles.
35.
So if we're zooming in, you got Kimball Junction in Park City, and then you got the summit, and then you got Salt Lake over here to the west. So when you get right to the peak of the summit, this is where the accident actually happened. There's a couple funny, weird factors here. That day, there's 3 lanes of traffic, and everybody was moving pretty fast. But man, people are hauling today. And we were in the fast lane, our left lane, and then all of a sudden traffic stopped abruptly in all lanes. And we managed to stop just fine. So this is the view from where we were going. Now you'll notice how in traffic there's this gully, but there's no barrier. There is a barrier. You get up a little further, just like it starts right there. So it's on the west side and down, but on the east side there's no barrier between the two oncoming lanes. So this is, I'm just going to prep you, this is about where the semi was. So there you can see the barrier where it stopped. There's a semi right here going west, east. We were going west on the other side. This would be about the semi's view. All these cars stop, including we stopped as the last one, and then the ambulance, the red guy, was following a little close trying to take a picture as far as I can tell from what happened. But a lot of stuff I couldn't talk about years ago when we were doing this because it was still a legal case. So this is about this is what I think the semi saw coming. That's crossing the median there. But what happens, we got hit way over there, and then upon impact, C5-6 of my neck perfused straight back, hitting the spinal roots on both sides, shutting off my arms and legs. I was literally paralyzed on impact. Didn't hurt. Boom, and I'm paralyzed. My wife, Shannon, my first wife, was deaf, and she's like, oh my gosh, we've been hit. And my first thought is, wow, these seats are a lot more comfortable in a rear impact collision than I thought they would be. But I didn't realize that I just herniated a disc in my neck and boom, everything was shut down. And then I looked down and I looked back up, and all of a sudden we didn't hit the car in front of us, but we started accelerating in the median, accelerating past the cars in the median. We just talked about, just 10 minutes before that, we're walking out the door from the coffee shop, and I think it was you that told me, hey, did you hear about that DeLorean, what was it?
It was the inertia switch recall.
So the inertia switch recall, that's the first I'd heard about it. was, hey, once your fuel pump won't turn off in a crash because it's double grounded, you have to cut a second wire or something. Well, I better take care of that as soon as I get home. Yeah. 10 minutes later, boom, and it's still running, and now we're accelerating past these cars in the median. And then the steering wheel starts doing this thing, and we start cruising across the dirt into head-on traffic. I'm like, honey, turn off the key, grab the wheel, put it in neutral. But she's just looking straight ahead. She can't hear me because she was deaf. And she's just like, why are we still moving? And we start accelerating through that dirt towards head-on traffic. There was nobody coming in the fast lane, but there was this semi in the middle lane. And the brain starts calculating, the adrenaline drops, your neurons are firing extra fast, everything seems in slow motion. Are our kids gonna move out? Are they gonna get married? The whole life before your eyes starts going on. And we start coming up, I'm just, doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. That semi is gonna totally T-bone us. And Shannon's probably a gunner, and I'm probably a gunner too. And all these things are just flashing through my head. It's terrifying. I still get a little teary-eyed every time I hear that song from Carrie Underwood, Jesus Take the Wheel, because that's a real come to Jesus moment. I'm like, oh, I don't know how we're gonna get past this next couple of minutes. But we start coming up out of the dirt, and I just like, all right, Lord, I guess I'll see you on the other side, because I don't know I'm powerless to control what's gonna happen next. And then this Jeep comes out of nowhere in the fast lane, and we T-bone the Jeep, which tears off the front of the car and spins us in the opposite. So the back doesn't look that bad, considering we just got hit by an ambulance, 14,000 pounds with the engine in the front. DeLorean, what, 2,900 pounds engine in the back? It's a lot of energy transfer. The front, boom, gonzo.
Wow.
But what's amazing is that I barely felt that. All the injury happened on the rear impact collision. My hands are in my lap, I'm paralyzed still. And I go, boop. I think my head scuffed the roof a little bit. They are pretty low ceilings in there. But yeah, I can't believe how well of a job that absorbs so much force from the front of the car. So he did really have a great idea of trying to make a safety vehicle. We all know our doors weigh 90 pounds because that's the only thing protecting us in a T-bone. So there's a lot of really cool safe features about the car, especially for the time. But I wouldn't recommend getting rear-ended if you can rear-end it. So there's the ambulance. It is next to no visible damage on the ambulance. And a lot of times insurance adjusters will say, your car's hardly damaged. What's the matter with you? Remember? There is zero correlation to injury to occupant and damage to vehicles. That's why so many people total their car and they quote unquote walk away without a scratch, and then some people get a minor impact and yet they're really injured.
Was the ambulance at least able to take you to the hospital?
No, because he was transporting somebody from Evanston, Wyoming to the U of U because they don't have a level 5. So there was somebody not in good shape strapped down in the back of that thing. So he got out, kind of waddled over to us, and I'm just, oh, and I didn't tell you this part. So, boom, we're here. You can see I'm just barely starting to be able to raise my hands up. I was paralyzed for about 6-8 minutes, and then they're just like fire ants, gloves of fire ants on my arms. Ah! And I had to like lift my leg out and get out and help get my wife over to the, you can see she's grabbing her breast. Get her over to the side of the freeway. I laid down next to her. Another ambulance came and brought her a stretcher, me a stretcher, and that was the last time I was on my feet for 4 days. I had to have my neck fused because of that herniation in my disc, or in my disc in my neck. He was not able to help us, the ambulance driver, because he had to take care of his person. So all he could do was walk over and see that we were still alive. Here's what's crazy, the Small Lake City, another thing. The second car behind that Jeep was the mechanic for my business networking group. And I see him walking around, my hands in my lap, I see him walking around like, people run up and they couldn't get the door open for Shannon. He comes around, opens my door, and I go, will you please grab my phone, it's on the floor, and take pictures of all the vehicles and license plates involved in this crash. That's how I had these pictures. So then we were both transferred up to the U of U. Let's see, I don't know if it's TMI, but you guys heard the story earlier today, but I get up there. Okay, $14,000 worth of imaging in 90 minutes. It's no treatment of any kind, just imaging. And so then after that, the nurse is like, hey, can you pee in this cup? Young, cute gal, I'm like, this is really uncomfortable. My wife is over in another room. Pee in a cup. She's over there testing it. She's like, do you have kidney problems? No, I don't have any kidney problems. Are you on a ketogenic diet? Yeah, I just happened to be on a ketogenic diet at the time. She goes, oh, okay, because your ketones are really high. So what's your pain level? Because when you're on a ketogenic diet, sugar is very pro-inflammatory. Inflammation causes pain. So she goes, what's your pain level right now? 0 to 10. 1. And then, this is what got really weird, Small Lake City. She goes, wait a minute, are you Dr. Shetlin? Yeah. She goes, I interviewed you in high school and read your book, and that's why I decided to become a nurse. I'm like, great, would you give me that towel and cover me up, please? So,
When did you get your feeling back?
so it came, like, it was still very weak. I was in the hospital for 4 days, and every day they kept coming in going, you know, we can't send you home yet, you gotta have surgery, we have to fuse that neck, it's really unstable, you could walk off a curb and be paralyzed, you could crash water skiing and be paralyzed and drown, we've gotta fuse it. And after 4 days, they said, look, it's still, I know you're still tingly and it's still weak, we gotta do surgery, but you're progressing enough that why don't you go do your chiropractic stuff for a month and let's schedule surgery in a month. So then I went and had other doctors in my office take care of me. You know, did chiropractic, physical therapy, massage, nutrition for anti-inflammation and for healing, laser therapy, which is amazing for healing things, tissues 4 or 5 times faster. If you break a bone in your arm, or any bone, and you use laser on it, instead of being 8 or 9 weeks to heal, you use laser a couple times a week. 3 weeks done, no side effects. It's incredible. So we're doing laser and all this stuff. So I go into surgery.
Hyperbaric chamber.
Oh, hyperbaric chamber for oxygen and pressure, so you're getting the oxygen deep into the tissues. But when you have inflammation, especially a concussion, which I definitely was concussed, it just helps get that very healing molecule deep into those tissues. So I go over the surgery, and this is amazing to me in our medical model, how our trauma care is so stellar. This guy goes in, cuts into my neck, moves blood vessels, muscles, arteries, things out of the way, scoops out a disc, puts in a bunch of crushed bones, 4 titanium screws in a plate, stitches me back together in 45 minutes. The time it takes to bake a cake. I mean, that's pretty impressive. He wakes me up and he goes, Dr. Shetlin, I don't know what you did at your office, but that was the easiest surgery I've done in 20 years in my career. Instead of being just a bunch of hamburger in there, it was actually healed up where I had tissues to work with a little easier. Awesome. And then I went back and did all my stuff except get adjusted. I mean, I love chiropractic, but I don't want to adjust something we're trying to fuse. So I let that fuse up for 9 months, and then now I'm a lifetime patient because above and below are going to be hypermobile, and they're going to become arthritic if I don't keep those mobilized. So I love what I do, or did. I guess I just retired. So, but chiropractors just kind of do it till they die, rather than truly retiring. And so I want to bring this up because here you see from a seatbelt how that put a visible injury on the neck. And a lot of times I'll see after a car accident an actual seatbelt, a black and blue Z. That's a very visible, objective finding that shows there was a lot of force transferred into the human body. But those heal up quick. What we can't see is those deep soft tissue injuries like ligament injuries, and they just don't show up very easy until later. And I bring this up for the doctors that work in this field, that we need to document when someone has scars. And I'm using this gal over here. I had a patient that was 16 and she wanted to be a model when she grew up. But she was the passenger in a Jeep that rolled, that her boyfriend had rolled, and then boom. So as an attorney, if that stuff's not documented, that, well, this is some of her aspiration, these are the things she wanted to do, this is permanent scarring, this is going to affect her career choices, those are what we call value drivers in the case, but they don't exist if the doctors don't document that. So that's where it's important for doctors to do the documentation right, so that the attorneys actually have the leverage they need to show that. And the reason I show Mark Hamill, I know that one's a little bit overly made up, but he did have some car accident, if you guys recall. And I'm sure that affected his, what happened?
He broke his nose.
Oh, okay.
So if you look, he's got like, between the first and second movie, his nose kind of goes off to one side because he was in a car accident.
Yeah. Is that a value driver for, is that going to affect the rest of his career? Possibly. Probably did. So, I mean, that's where you gotta have the right documentation to help people after a car accident, make sure that stuff's covered. So I just wanted to wrap up. Are we doing okay on time?
Oh, we're doing fine.
Okay, because I was talking 90 miles an hour. I'm sorry I was going so fast, but I want
Oh, tell us more stories. Yeah, keep going, keep going.
So here's some fun things we can do with our car, I think, to help them be safer. LED lights for sure, and then trying to have them daylight running. This is a fun fact that I didn't even know this research, so I got it from, who's that cute couple that drives across the country in their Back to the Future car?
Oliver and Terry.
Oliver and
Oliver and
Terry.
Terry. He had some, they gave me some research like, yeah, there's 20% less crashes for people who drive their daylight driving lights on because you're more visible. Well, if you got people with tinted windows, when your lights are on, you're more visible. Like if they're going to pull out in front of you when you have your lights on, especially if there's rain or it's dawn or dusk, that kind of stuff, you're much more visible too with headlights on. It's the law in most states, but I can't believe how many people don't do it. When we're on just a two-way road, like where we went out to the mine, you're supposed to have your headlights on to make you more visible. So many people don't. So being more visible with your lights, especially with a silvery gray car, we're probably hard to see at dawn and dusk, or when it's raining, or a third brake light. I wish I would have had a third brake light at that time. I did not have that on my first car. I definitely have it on my second car. Just one more thing to make us visible because we're so low. And if you're beefing up your suspension with the iBox suspension, it's making you even lower. Now you got better handling, which I think makes the car safer, but you're lower. So additional lights that are still sexy, not too, those 80s big lights were big and round. Remember those? 4x4 lights and stuff. You're trying to add lights. Now LEDs make things so much more sleek. Brakes, definitely updating your brakes. I know that they got disc conversions now. I don't know how many of you guys have looked into that. I haven't done it, but I'm looking serious if I can find one of them. There's 2 or 3 of them out there, aren't there? The disc brakes.
Yeah. Well, vented disc brakes.
Yeah.
And Ed Muting makes the easiest kit.
Which one?
Ed Muting in
Okay.
England. That's what I put on all our cars,
There you go.
and I really like it. Yeah.
Great. I gotta get that kit on my car. But yeah, you always wanna, for safety, you always wanna have good brakes and change your lines. Don't use 40-year-old lines. Quality tires, we talked about that out there today. Sometimes we're driving these cars on some really old tires. So definitely you wanna have good tires. Make sure your steering, ball joints, all those things are safe for handling. Good electrical stuff, your horn and your hazards, especially since we have people in our blind spots and riding our tail, trying to get the sweet picture. Make sure your hazards work. It's like, put your hazards on and say, hey buddy, back off. You want to have those kind of things be proactive. The wings aloft, not only are they way cool and bring the car a little more modern, it's invisible. It doesn't make your car look any less stock, but it's really nice for getting in and out. And then you've updated your electrical system for the locking mechanism, crash stuff. And then of course the fuel pump and the inertia switch. And so I wish that information had been out earlier. From what I understand, we knew about it a year prior. I don't know why it took so long to get that recall. I know why. We're going to talk about it on video.
Oh, no. Okay. Just a quick question for the group. How many of you have had your upper and lower air A-arms greased? Shit.
Grease your A-arms.
One person. The DeLorean steering doesn't give you a good feel that you need to grease your upper and lower A-arms. But if you do that, you will notice a drastic improvement in the ability to steer the car. So if you're trying to avoid an accident and you want to be able to move the car quickly, because the DeLorean has a really bad problem of what's called understeer, get your upper and lower A-arms greased.
Awesome.
The other thing you can do is they're now selling this in Europe, is greasable tie rod ends, which again lessen the amount of force it takes to steer the car in a different direction. You know, being able to avoid an accident is really, really important. Besides all the other safety things.
Well, this is what the insurance adjusters. This is what the insurance adjuster lawyers think when you have a crash. So you usually gotta have a good attorney in your case to help fight these guys.
Yep.
They're the ones that are saying, oh, people aren't hurt in car accidents. Kids aren't hurt in car accidents. Yeah, they are. It's the #1 cause of death of kids and teens in this country.
Buses don't need seatbelts.
Buses don't need seatbelts, right? Yep. So there's a lot of weird stuff out there. They say stuff like, oh, you were rear-ended and it was a low-speed collision under 10 miles an hour. That's like sitting down in a chair or riding a roller coaster. No, that's not how the physics works. Let's finish up with some video here. We don't need the sound. So we had that meeting. It was literally 10 minutes after that meeting. I remember this guy. That was so scary being paralyzed. I wouldn't wish that on anybody. There's a Jeep over there on the right. The sad thing is, the interior was gorgeous on this car. The The tow truck literally did the kitty litter and scooped up all the parts, Jeep parts, my parts, and the kitty litter stuff, and just threw it in the car and closed the doors.
Yep.
So, even the interior wasn't salvageable on this one afterwards. And I just had the wheels machined a month before this. The wheels were the only thing that I think were salvageable on the car, were the wheels. I mean, I'm sure you get some other deep parts, electrical or something.
The doors look.
They look good, but every panel was bent except the passenger door. Every other panel on the car was messed up.
Did you get to keep the car for parts?
No, they wanted $15,000.
What?
Wow. So I'm like, yeah, but somebody else bought it at auction. I don't know who it is.
It was on Copart, I think, wasn't it?
It'd be interesting to look at the VIN and get his accident.
Yeah, look up the VIN and see who got it.
Yeah.
Is there a way to do that? I don't know how to do it.
Do it, yeah, if you have your VIN, go to Carfax, and it should give you the truth of the accident history.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And if you type in the VIN for DeLorean 4675, Carfax made up a fake accident history of that DeLorean time machine being struck by lightning.
So I remember you were saying you had issues with your insurance company giving you what the value of the car is. Did you ever get that worked out?
I had a stated value. They gave me the stated value, but I should have upped the value because in 2015 they jumped. And they've gone up about 4% per year since then, as far as what I'm hearing. But I hadn't updated it.
What should it be insured?
I would say you should be in the 80 to 90 range at this point. Yeah.
You have to get an appraiser to get that.
Well, depending on your insurance company, you should be able to do a stated without an appraisal. But it's easy to get an appraisal from any of the DMC shops, like Toby or.
Usually charge $250 for a professional appraiser.
So money well spent. It's always better to be overinsured than underinsured. Yeah, the passenger door was still good. Everything else, toast.
That way she can say whatever she wants.
Just buff it out.
No, you're fine.
A little scratch.
And I remember when I got out of the car, I'm like, I walked around with my wife out. Where's the bumper and the hood? I couldn't see it anywhere.
Yeah, that's,
It's like someone took an eraser and just,
we're not gonna do it, we're not gonna do it. Wow. Recording can't says.
it looks like that spare tire actually.
Yeah.
It had some structural.
Yeah, it's funny, in my neighborhood, I was carrying like a little crowbar in the side, just in case I had to pry myself out of it.
I've got one of those little hammers with a little pointed thing between my seats and stuff. Yeah, I couldn't do anything. I would've been-
Nothing spilled. It's empty. You're good. How are we doing on time?
Oh, we're doing fine. We're ahead of schedule.
Oh, okay.
Well, they found the bumper. And they found the hood.
Oh.
Chris Nicholson on that one.
Yeah.
Well, that's all I've got for you.
Mine
Hopefully
was
that's.
King Constable.
All right, thank you, Jay.